This is the Rugby Ascendant podcast with Welman and Chris Wyatt.
It's the Rugby Ascendant podcast. We chat rugby to Chris Wyatt, and you're in Gordons Bay, last day in South Africa, Chris.
Indeed. I can't believe the month has passed. I came here with a plan to observe the elections, travel around, meet people, do some filming, wait for the government to be announced, and then hear who the cabinet was. But it looks like I'm going to fly home without knowing who South Africa's cabinet is. So I might have to extend my visit a little bit longer. No, but seriously, yes, it's my last day. And my first trip back to South Africa after all the lockdowns was in 2022. And ironically, I finished the trip in Gordons Bay as well. It was my first trip to Gordons Bay ever. Even though I've been to South Africa hundreds of times, I'd never been. And so I've come back here. I've got a lovely opportunity, some wonderful hosts, and had a good day yesterday off to Hermanus and took care of some business there and back on this side. And so, yeah, well, I leave with not a heavy heart, but a bit of disappointment. I was able to attend the quarterfinal with you and this final. That's not the disappointment. I enjoyed meeting you there, but the disappointment is that we left a little heartbroken. And honestly, we're not going to dwell on this game, but I think probably the person with the heaviest heart or most heartbroken might have been Jake White after that game. It just didn't go the way the Bulls had hoped for, and it was so close at the end. I mean, those who love rugby said, hey, what a game, what a finish. It just didn't go the Bulls' way. But what a season. The Bulls really dominated, scoring on the board. They had a little inconsistency during the season, but I think they played pretty well. And MW, this is 3 years in a row. And 3 years we've had the URC final on South African soil. The Bulls have been twice, the Stormers have been twice. And while I'm a little miffed that sides have come to South Africa and walked away with the trophy 2 years in a row, I'm still pretty impressed that the South African sides have found themselves, of the 6 teams in the final, was it 2, 4, 6? Yeah, they've been the teams 4 times. Yeah, so I mean, look, there were a lot of skeptics when South African sides went back to what became URC from the Guinness Pro 14 after the Cheetahs and Southern Kings were unceremoniously dumped. And then these teams came back and they left Super Rugby. A lot of skepticism. I wasn't a skeptic. I said from the very beginning, this is the smartest move ever, and you'll see it in a few years. And I don't think we had to wait a few years. We've seen almost instantaneously. The game is much better, and I think this is an outstanding competition.
Yeah, there were quite a few naysayers. Huh? Some guys said, yeah, they give the tournament 3 years. And after 3 years, it's never been stronger. I mean, this broke all kinds of attendance records, viewing records. They made records amount of money, and the crowds are buying into it. I mean, this is a final. It might have been at Loftus, and as a Bulls final, but it was against a team that nobody actually even heard of a couple of years ago, and a full Loftus Stadium pitched up, and that's not an easy thing to do in Blue Bull country. You need to be a Stormer or somebody similar to get a full house, and not even the Sharks could draw a full house when that derby took place.
No, you're absolutely right. And here's something that I think is being overlooked. If it was not for the science-challenged restriction of 30,000 fans at that first final between the Bulls and the Stormers DHL Greenpoint, that would have been sold out. That stadium would have been completely sold out. But even so, we have 50,000 plus last year at DHL Greenpoint for the final with Munster. This year we got 50,000 plus. I mean, that would have been over 150,000 fans at 3 finals in South Africa. I mean, you just don't see this often with the economic challenges and the struggles people are going through. It was, I felt very good about it. And like you say, I mean, when you come up to the Highveld, unless it's the Stormers, you're not going to get a full house, even the Sharks struggle. So this was, I think, just absolutely amazing. I think it's great for the game of rugby. I don't know. I think I'm pretty happy. What about you?
Well, I tell you one thing. I wasn't happy on Saturday night. That's putting it mildly. You were sitting there with me in that press conference, and I tell you what, the mood was quite dejected. Franco Smith and Carl Steyn, the funny thing for me that I mentioned to someone else as well, they were talking Afrikaans to each other behind the table there, move up a little bit.
Representing Glasgow, they're sitting there talking Afrikaans. But
yeah,
listen, I mean, I agree with you. It was dejected, particularly while we're waiting for Jake to come. And when Ruan Norkia came in, boy, I felt bad for him. That was a tough press conference for Ruan. He handled it well, though. But I think that I wasn't so dejected, even though Glasgow won, because Franco was there and Kyle and they weren't arrogant. They were very respectful about their win. They were actually kind of subdued. I got to give them a lot of credit. Very professional on their part. They could have been like, oh, whoops and hollers. Yeah, and then Matt Fagerson, same way. Very just, hey, he was man of the match, well deserved. and they were very good champions. I'll say that.
Yeah, gracious in defeat, but also gracious in victory. There's a big difference. And somebody remarked about the fact about how well the Bulls crowd actually handled this defeat. They emptied the stadium in record time, make no mistake. I think it was the first time the cup was handed over in front of an empty stadium. But I mean, there weren't any boos or anything like that. In terms of the crowd took it on the chin. I heard a couple of, choice swear words there. I told you this one guy bet his house basically on this match. The Bulls went and lost. But that's his own problem. It's not the Bulls' fault. So now I wanted to say the one thing that I noticed that bothered me a little bit, I wanted to talk to you about that, is the fact that Ruan and Jake weren't in the same press conference at the same time. And Ruan sort of came into the press conference room and went to sit right at the back there, all on his own, some lonesome. I felt quite sorry for him. It was like he was sort of thrown to the wolves. And I'm not saying that Jake did that. I'm just saying the way that they approached it was to me a little bit unpleasant almost, compared to what Glasgow did with the 3 players sitting next to or 2 players sitting next to the coach, having a chat about it. And I think that mental kind of support for your captain might have been a welcome thing.
I agree 100%. I think that the two of them should have been seated next to each other, and that would have been, I think, fair for both of them, Jake and Ruan. Like I said, it was a tough press conference for Ruan. I looked at the film. It was only like 10 minutes. It seemed a lot longer.
It did, huh?
I mean,
Yeah, I know.
It felt like it was a 20-minute press conference, but the tape was only 8.5 minutes. I was like, wow, because I was editing to put up a video. I'm like, okay, I haven't got much content here. I got one question in, but look, I got a feel for him. But look, we're not going to get into the details of the game. It's done and dusted. The Bulls did not win. Glasgow are worthy champions. And while it sucks and it hurts, I take solace in the fact that I'm actually a Stormers fan, so I'm not that heartbroken.
Yeah, you're the second person to say that to me in 2 days now. Fair weather friends, I tell you.
No, come on. I'm not a fair weather friend.
No, I'm joking.
Look, I mean, I know, but talk about a fair weather friend. I mean, Glasgow messed up all my travel plans. I have been traveling, meeting people, filming things, giving interviews, appearing on the radio, all these things happening. And I have not caught my breath, as is usually the case when I come to South Africa. And so I had it all laid out. The last 6 days would be in the Western Cape. I'm going to have a cappuccino on the beach. I'm going to relax, sit in the mountains, maybe do a little zip lining over at Sarah's. And then Glasgow, I had to go and win that game against Munster. So I had to scramble. You were like, you better book your ticket now. And I had to book a plane ticket. I had to make a reservation for a hire, and I had to get a hotel room right there at Loftus. So I scrambled, did all that. So that, I'm not a fair weather fan. That cost me a few, I had to sell a few goats for that,
Yeah, I can imagine. No, I'm kidding. No, I was glad to see you there. And I saw you were very active there. You're walking around in the stands and talking to fans and the likes. You like doing that, don't you?
Well, I do. And to be fair, a lot of people know me, not so much from the rugby, although a lot of people know me from Rugby Ascendant, but more people know me from my news program, Colonel Chris Wyatt, the Indaba Africa channel, the Chris Wyatt Reports program. And what happens is when I go places, look, I'm not a celebrity of any sort, trust me, I certainly don't want to be, but a lot of people recognize me, and the Paul Kruger bar kind of stands out at a distance. And people see me in the stands, and I go down to get some photographs of the teams warming up and that sort of thing, get some good shots of that for the media. But I also do it quite honestly because it's neat for people to say, hey, it's the Colonel. Hey, Chris, how you doing? And for me, that's kind of a way of paying it back. I mean, people take the time, they use their data, which can be quite expensive. They use their time, and the most precious thing we have other than our family in our lives is our time. So when people give their time to watch my content, that's kind of why I walk around the stadium. Some people might go, wow, he's just full of himself. He likes people to recognize him. Yeah, that's fun, but it's really kind of like paying it back to people who spend their time and their energy to listen to what I have to say and consider it. They don't have to agree with what I have to say, but they consider it. And to me, that's a small way I can pay it back. And honestly, MW, it is kind of fun. I mean, at Loftus, I was recognized 8 different times at the final. I mean, I walked out of the Overflow Press Center, which was one of these boxes where I'd been, and I walk out and they open this metal gate because you can't really see through it very well. And this guy comes up and goes, "Hey, Chris, how you doing?" Don't know who he is, you know? But I so anyway, it was it's kind of nice, and that's why I walk around. Also, 50,000 people at Loftus. If you don't walk around, you don't get the feel for it. In that press box, you're behind the glass, and it's not the same experience as on the game. Besides, I get a little excited occasionally, and I don't want to disturb the other people working in media. So it's good that I walk around the field.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. I spoke to the guy that sat next to me, and I said to him, "Yeah, for 50,000 people, the atmosphere was pretty subdued, and there's a big thing going on about the DJ and the music playing, and the crowd not really being allowed to get into the game because of the game, because of the rugby being played. They're being G'd up by Sweet Caroline and you know all kinds of
Well,
songs and the
the
likes.
the music was being played while the game was being played. I mean,
Yeah,
he needs to learn better. I mean, there were lineouts, and there were like another 6 or 7 seconds. Music white guys are running around the pitch. That's not cool. Look, I'm not a fan of that. You want to play music at halftime, fine, but I don't think music should be played during a game of 15s. Sevens, I get it. Every time they stop, they play music. It's a party, but it really, I think, in some ways, I got to go along with what you're saying here. It takes the crowd out of the game because
yeah,
it's the idea is to get them jazzed up, but it's not working. Other than Sweet Caroline and a couple other things, it fell flat. And frankly, for a crowd of 50,000, I'm not attacking the crowd, but this was a very quiet crowd. Only 2 or 3 times did they really amp up the volume, and that was a little disappointing because But I will say this: the Bulls pregame show, the atmosphere they brought it. That was brilliant. I mean, that was incredible. It was almost like being back at the FIFA World Cup in 2010 when I was at
yeah.
Loftus. It was the same atmosphere pre-game, and I thought that was going to like really get the crowd into it. And especially when the Bulls ran out to about a 13-0 lead, I'm like, whoa, but we're up 13-0 against Glasgow in the final. And it's like, could you another beer, sweetheart? I'll be here where you're going. It just kind of was flat. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's what I said. It definitely it felt flat. In that second half, it was really flat, and that's probably because the Warriors, they shushed the crowd. They played the crowd quiet. That's just the way it is. I mean, if you're up against 52,000 players or people on in the stands, the only way to get them to go quiet is to beat their team, and that's what they did. Let's give them credit. I want to make a point of saying here that the Glasgow Warriors deserved to win that match. Make no mistake.
Yep, absolutely.
To be
100%.
13-0 behind, come back and effectively win the second half, if you take that try just before halftime into account, they won it by 21 points to 3. That
Yeah,
takes
well
some
deserved.
doing, man. Takes away the altitude, it takes everything away. And I saw those little jokes they're making about that altitude doesn't matter. The point is their coach is exceptional. I'm talking to you, by the way, later this week, which should be
Yep.
interesting. And I think, let's not dwell on that too much. Let's just say that they won the match and they deserved to win the match. But I wanted to speak to you more in terms of what is the future for the Bulls now. I read an article yesterday that said the Bulls they batted above their average, or they did better than what they should have done by getting into the finals twice in 3 years' time. So how did they get to that final step? How did they get to be the dominant team that they were in the late 2000s, when they won 3 Super Rugby titles in a row and the likes? Number one, where do you think the deficiencies are? And then we'll talk about how can we address the deficiencies. Let's start. What do you think is not yet the finished article in this Bulls team?
All right, let me cover 2 things from the last topic before we go, because I want to get them. And they said altitude wasn't a factor. Well, apparently it wasn't, because an easy kick from short distance was missed despite the high altitude and thin air by Glasgow. So yes, I agree that altitude wasn't a factor, because it didn't help them get it over the post on the one that kick. It would have sealed the game late. It wouldn't have mattered. The second thing is that watching the game, that try at the end of the first half, it's like the Bulls just got a puncture in the tire. And then the air just went out the rest of the game until they were flat at the end. And that's, I think, the good analogy. Okay, so what did the Bulls do? Well, first off, I agree that the Bulls have punched above their weight in their first 3 seasons in the URC. When Jake took this team over, it was ugly. They got to a final, but they didn't look good getting to the final. They just did what they needed to do to get there. And then they could have beaten my Stormers, but thankfully they didn't at DHL Greenpoint Stadium. I think the 16th man, or the 24th man, however you want to call it, actually played a role in that 30,000 seat stadium there and affecting the Bulls. And so we got that. We stole that one. 18-13 was the final, if I recall correctly. Well, the good news is this, MW. Cameron Hanneken was only 22, I think. So I think,
22 though, not 21.
Yeah, 22. Yeah, we've got a bright future there. No, anyway. But and Sergio Peterson, was the only person that ever won a final before. So I think no. But seriously, the Bulls, I criticized them heavily last year and the year before for their discipline. Their discipline was atrocious. Guys making stupid penalties, making dumb decisions, and costing them points and costing them field position. That was a major problem for that. I think that got cleaned up a lot this season. It was much better. Like we saw in the game against Leinster, discipline was critical. They didn't do dumb things at the wrong time, and that really made a big difference in not giving the opponent an advantage of getting down the pitch. So I don't think that's an issue for them going forward. I just think that experience is going to play a role. Jake kept talking in our press conferences about, this many tests and this many. He's like, look at the Leinster. These guys have thousands of caps. And that's true. And that's why they just know each other. And you think you get a feel for that. I think in the game against Leinster, you could see where Willie knew where to put the ball, not when he was kicking deep, but when he went shorter kicks, like that first kick that started off, well, it was a quarterfinal. So the quarterfinal against Benetton, Willie just knew and could trust where Curtly Arnsey was going to be. It was a perfect kick. That comes with teams working together, not just practicing, but playing on the pitch together. You just have a second nature feel. It's like in ice hockey when you're going across the blue line and you don't look, you just pass to a spot off on your wing, and your wing gets there and scores the goal. It's the same sort of thing, I think, in rugby. And I think that the Bulls are getting there, and that's a benefit of these past 3 years. Look, it's a bonus. They got to 2 finals in 3 years. That's incredible. I mean, it wasn't expected. So, but the expectations are going to increase going forward. People are going to expect more next year. They're going to expect them to be at the top of the log all season long and get back to a semifinal, to a final. But it's interesting for me, and that's why I think it's hard for me to say how can they improve, because we've seen so many injuries. And then next man up is Sergio Peterson comes in there. We see that Devin Williams comes up, the Puma star. I never expect to see him wearing a Bulls uniform. That seems like sacrilege. But anyway, at least from a Curry Cup perspective. But Willie comes into the team. And I think that, the loss of Curtly and Keenan and other players, and Marcel Coetzee didn't make it back for the final. We saw that. That was kind of disappointing. I think with the Bulls, the philosophy Jake has got, he's never said this, but it's my view. It's next man up. We're not going to quibble or worry about injuries or players falling off. Someone else has to step up. And look, we're going to talk about the Springboks maybe a little bit today. We're certainly going to talk about them on Thursday, but after the team selection is announced later today. But here's the thing. The Bulls, in some respects, I think, are spoiled for talent. I mean, they've got great wings. They got great fullbacks. And I think they got great locks too. So some people may take exception to that, but that's just my kind of view on it. I don't know if I answered your question. I think I addressed it in kind of a roundabout fashion. I'm feeling like a politician, so I just went around the question.
No, I think you're right in terms of the next person up, yes. But I think the problem is the levels. I've said this many times. The Bulls have built depth, but they've built an A team and a C team, and not an A team and a B team.
There's no B team. Okay,
yes.
I think that's a very fair statement. There is a drop off from A to C, and there is no B in many cases. Yep, I agree.
But the limitations are budgets. You can't afford to build a B team because your budget goes towards your bigger players, your bigger stars. And the Bulls have been clever about contracting so that they don't lose too many of their players. Like the Sharks will probably play with their entire B or C team, whatever you want to call it, when they go to the Springboks. But the point is, if you want to contract a Willie or a Keenan, you're going to pay several million for him, and then you're going to have to sacrifice somewhere else. In South African terms, the Bulls and the Stormers, all the South African franchises have a very delicate balance to maintain, and many balls to juggle. We spoke about this. You've got the URC, you've got the Champions Cup or the Challenge Cup, depending what you participate in. Directly after the URC now is the Curry Cup starting. There was a bit of uncertainty whether it's going to happen or not, but it's going to happen. And to be able to use their players, Jake had to rest most of his players for 8 weeks consecutively to qualify to play for the Curry Cup. That's for the player welfare and the likes. Plus, you've got, like I said, 2 tournaments going overseas. You have to participate in both of them. You have to send your best teams contractually. And you've got budget limitations. You're only allowed to have 56 players in your squad, and you're only allowed to spend 85 million rand. And what do you do? How do you divide that cake compared to teams like Toulouse, who spend 300 million a year on their players? That's a very uneven battlefield, and I think for what the cards that the South African teams in general and the Stormers and the Bulls in particular have been dealt, they're doing a bloody good job. I think so.
No, I think they're doing a brilliant job. It reminds me of sports in America too. When I was a young kid, the Orioles would develop talent, and they'd have great teams, and they'd win. And then the Yankees had billionaires who owned the team, and so they'd buy the talent and give them outrageous contracts. And players would leave because, I mean, look, if you're going to be offered, 10 million versus 1 million, you don't get to play forever. You got to secure that money while you can. So you can't blame the players, but it really, I think, perverted the sports. It's the same, they've got salary caps in leagues now so that you have to be within that. And of course, we saw famously the Saracens up in England. They got spanked for the salary cap issues, but I'm not a fan of the salary cap, but I certainly do appreciate. I mean, look, in the South African context, a South African / American wealthy individual is behind the Sharks now, and they're just buying players up. I mean, Ebenezabeth is no longer a Stormer. He plays for Sharks. He's identified there now. They took Sia Khaleesi away from the Stormers. I mean, they brought him over with money. Now they've lost him to France. Although France might want to give him back after this season.
Looks like it.
That's a whole other story. That's a whole other story. But it's. I think that really skews things, and I appreciate it. But I look even further than that, MW. I mean, I look at how challenging it is for the Cheetahs, the Pumas, and especially the Griquas. I mean, the Griquas are so poor they can't even afford grass on the pitch. It's concrete.
Yeah, but that's one of their strong points. That's on purpose.
That's true. You got to have respect for anybody who plays on that kind of turf, because when you hit the ground, it hurts. But no, seriously. One of my prized collection things this trip was I managed to secure a Griquas ball cap because they were selling them outside the Bulls game. I don't know why, but I have a Griquas jersey, which I don't have in my possession. Johan Mumsen, he's a lock that played for Atlanta. He's from South Africa. He played for the Griquas in the Currie Cup, and he secured a Griquas jersey for me. But then I missed him on a trip to DC. I wasn't able to make that game when he brought it. And then he's now playing in Houston. I haven't been back to Houston, so I don't have my jersey. They try to get that Griquas jersey for a while. But, I think that the money issue is a real problem. And then, of course, it gets so expensive with all the flights and the travel. That's absolutely the case. And look, I mean, just a few years ago, South African Rugby Union was bankrupt. I mean, that's the reason they took the test match in DC against Wales back in 2018, Rossi's first game, because they got a guaranteed payday. Of course, USA Rugby went into bankruptcy after that, but that's another story.
Yeah,
but no, I think that the money issue is really big. But and also, honestly, I think URC ought to consider. They won't because there's money involved, but I think they ought to consider a 15-game season, not an 18-game season. I mean, those 3 weeks could make a difference, keeping players fit and healthy with all the commitments for national teams, for the test, for the different competitions. And the other thing that disturbs me is I'm not a fan of the way they do the Challenge and Champions Cup, where it breaks up the season. That's just, to me, it's cockeyed. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but I would rather see the Champions and Challenge Cup come after the Premier League, the French League, and then of course URC. When they're done, then have that stuff. I'm not sure why they do it the way they do it, but what you wind up having is rugby 52 weeks a year, which as a huge rugby fan, of course, we know fan is short for fanatic. As a fanatic for rugby, I love it. I get rugby all year long, but it is brutal on the players and it is quite expensive. And I think we have to be careful not to dilute the talent base, which is what happened to Super Rugby. The travel and the talent base and the cost of it just become unmanageable. Anyway, yeah, I think that that money's an issue here, and it's unfortunate. I'm glad to see South Africans show up for this final. I wish there'd been more at the semifinal. They missed out on a great game. That was an incredible game. Yeah, so I mean, it was a much smaller crowd. I think 30,000+, 31,000, 32,000. So people missed out. But I do appreciate the situation. It's the same in America. Inflation is eating people's budgets alive. They just don't have the money to go places. And I mean, if you got 2 or 3 kids, you add the kids up, they're going to want some candy floss, or they're going to want a jersey. They're going to, and I mean, unless you're a parent that says is good at saying no, next thing you know, you're out a few thousand rand, and that gets pricey. But anyway, yeah, I think that the Bulls and the Stormers have done incredibly well in the first 2 seasons. The Lions they're kind of on the edge. They need to change a little bit, and then they'll be in those playoffs every year too. But I think the Lions look really good the last 6 weeks of the season. It's a shame they didn't get into the playoffs.
Well, the next challenge up is the Currie Cup. I mentioned it briefly before. And the thing is that these Bulls, they've now managed to get to the final twice in 3 years, need to win this Currie Cup. I think to me it's a non-negotiable. The only uncertain thing about this at the moment is how many of those Bulls players are going to be called up to the Springbok camp, who they're going to be left with. But I know Jake planned for that. He told us that much in many of the press conferences. He gave those players rest. Like Sergio Peterson, when he had to come back when Kirtley was suddenly... Sebastian de Klerk was injured. Kirtley came back from his 8 weeks leave. Not Kirtley, Sergio came back from his 8 weeks leave. And many of those players have been given that opportunity to be able to play in the Currie Cup. And that's where they're going to start building that depth. And but many of those players would have felt the agony of this defeat, and they would have remembered what it felt like to lose, and also what it felt like to get to the final. I think it's going to be it's going to make them stronger. But honestly, I think for the Bulls to kick on, if that's the right term to use, this Currie Cup must be won, non-negotiable.
Well, it's interesting because the last couple of seasons, a lot of people have been dissing the Currie Cup, saying it should be canceled. I mean, it's the oldest championship and the competition in the world. They want to get rid of it, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, you're nuts. They're like, it's just the talent's low. No, I mean, look, I see a lot of players I've never heard of who make their appearance in the Curry Cup because I'm not here to watch varsity. A lot of people see these players in varsity at university. I don't see that. I'm seeing it now on my trips because I'm able to catch some games at Tux and Bits and Joburg, places like that. But and Monty's, but I don't normally see that because I don't have that available on television, so I don't see the talent coming up. So for me, the Curry Cup is a great way to see it. I think the Curry Cup is a venerable competition. I mean, of course, we know the province has more championships than anyone else. I think I should mention that to a Bulls fan. But no,
and I was waiting for that one.
Yeah, I know you were waiting for that pin to drop. But the other thing is that the last couple of years, people have been kind of dismissive because the Pumas have won this thing. Like, whoa, the Pumas won it. Well, so what? They deserved it. The Pumas and Griquas, that was an incredible final. I was just disappointed because, listen, I mean, when it comes to Curry Cup, I'll root for Province, but I love the Griquas. I mean, I always root for them. It's just the cultural thing from that part of the country. Just something about them I like. And so I really want to see them win. But the Pumas won it. They deserved it. Jimmy Stonehouse did a great job with that team. Then this past year, the Cheetahs won it. And I think that was so great for one of the greatest, in my view, in our lifetime, one of the greatest rugby players ever who goes out, winning a Curry Cup. That's, well, it's pretty cool, I thought. So it's a shame that he did win the Challenge Cup, but, anyway. But, yeah, so, I mean, look, if you're 40 years old and you can still be a scrum half and you're better than most of them around the world, I think that's impressive. Anyway, but, yeah, so I'm looking forward to the Curry Cup. I don't know who else is, but I know I am. And your point that the Bulls have to win it, well, okay, I'll accept that. But I'll be rooting for Province, of course. And short of that, anytime the Griquas play, I'll be rooting for the Griquas. The Bulls will come in about third place on that chanting list for me.
Yeah, chanting list, but not finishing list. Make no mistake. No, you'll see that the team or the squad that the Bulls are going to be using the Curry Cup is quite a strong one. It's not like in the previous years where they used very young players and upcoming players. It's a much better squad. Much more of the senior squad going to play there. Like Jaco van der Walt is going to play there. Chris Smith is going to play there on fly half. Henry Immelman is going to play on center. Devin Williams probably going to play at fullback. It's going to be a strong team there. That's what I'm saying. And this is where they're going to be able to build that C team maybe into a B team or develop them into a B team that we talked about earlier. That's why I think it's so important. And I think Province, let's talk about Province a little bit, just quickly. They're in pretty much the same situation. I mean, they were the finalists 2 years in a row. This year they ended fifth, not exactly what they wanted to do, but they've got a similar problem to what the Bulls have. Too much talent in certain positions and not enough in other positions. And they need to start filling those gaps. And I think the Curry Cup will be the ideal opportunity to do that. And I think the Pumas and the Cheetahs, and the Griquas for that matter, are not going to have it that easy this year. The Bulls and the Stormers are going to come for this one. And maybe the Sharks even for that matter.
No, I think you're 100%. And I think the Sharks are going to feel hungry because they won that Challenge Cup. I mean, they had an atrocious, absolutely atrocious. Look, there's nothing positive to look back on the URC season for the Sharks at all. But boy, they stepped up and won that Challenge Cup. Yeah. I mean, I hope so. They paid for all that talent. No, I think you're right. The Bulls and the Bulls and the Province are going to come at this hard. And yeah, to be fair, I think I'd have to admit, if I'm honest, South Africans love to say, if I'm honest. And I always say, well, what else would you be but honest?
Yeah,
but anyway,
I say the same thing.
If I'm honest, what else would I be? If I'm honest, yeah, I think that the past couple of years that the Griquas and the Pumas have had kind of a good break because there's been a focus on the URC and elsewhere and not on this Curry Cup. But yeah, I think it's a great time for both those squads to prove their mettle. And, as long as the Province come out ahead of the Bulls, it'll be a good season in Curry Cup.
Oh, from your side of the camera, not from this side of the camera. It's the exact other way around.
No, I think your camera focus is messed up. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously. No, but listen, MW, isn't it great that people can have this friendly banter about their teams in the competition? It's nobody's breaking out fisticuffs, making threats.
No, I like that. But I like it. I like it a lot. I mean, I saw on Saturday how many people were sitting there with their Stormers jerseys on and the Springboks jerseys and the Lions jerseys. And they weren't there to support Glasgow. They were there to support the Bulls. And I like that. And I know there's a long-standing tradition of provincialism and factionalism and the stuff, but I think we moved beyond that now. I like this idea of we support South African teams, but when your team plays against another South African team, you support your own team, and that's what I do.
Well, as an American who is a South African fanatic and for rugby, and always has been for a good 40 years or so, not to give my age away, but I've been trying to foster that spirit for the past 4 or 5 years, that you root for South African sides and any differences you have go away. and you're a spirited supporter when it comes to your team playing against somebody else. But anytime South Africans are playing, you're on board.
Okay, Chris, enough of that local stuff. There was also another little game at Twickenham over the weekend. We tried to watch it at Loftus. It was a bit in vain. There was too much going on. We didn't see much of it at the field itself. Let's just talk about it briefly. What was your impressions of the Springbok experiment at that match?
Well, I like the outcome a lot better than Rossi's first experiment at RFK back in 2018, a game that I was at in a pouring rainstorm, which the debutants really, I think the biggest contribution they made that day was showing how to knock the ball on. That was seemed to be their Scott. But no, I like the outcome, but I would say that the Springboks were flat in many ways. I was impressed with the debutant appearance of most of the players. Jordan Hendricks came in for a lot of criticism, people saying he wasn't up to task. But look, I mean, to be fair to the guy, it looked like he had butterflies and that he did miss kick early on and his ball placement wasn't that great early on. But I think as the game went on, Hendricks improved and he began to step up to it. But yeah, we'll see. I think he's a better player than his brother, different positions, but I really like him as a player. But I'd have to say that Ben Jason Dixon didn't get enough time to show his mettle, but the little bit of time he's out there, he made an impact. But boy, Edwill van der Merwe, oh man, his time. What that try that he scored up the middle was that was a thing of beauty. And you know, he was not going to be denied. They got their arms around him almost to the try line and he got across. That was brilliant. But that wasn't the only part of it. His entire game was fantastic. Listen, you got to give Wales a lot of credit, MW. I mean, Wales they were down 2 players with yellow cards and didn't give up any points. And this is one of my big beefs with the Springboks. You got to put the dagger in the heart. You got 2 yellow cards against this team, and they were on the defense. Wales was on offense most of the time. They were down 2 players. It was incredible. And they just let them back into the game. And to their credit, Wales got back to 14-13 deficit. I'm like, whoa. It's, you know, at the end of the first half, I was left with a very underwhelming feeling from the first half and so much opportunity wasted. In the end, they got the task done. They picked it up late in the game. But there are stretches there when the team seemed disorganized, their kicking was poor, their placement was poor, players weren't communicating well. But I will happily attribute that to newer players coming together on this team as a Springbok team and not having worked together as Springboks before, and explain why the ball wasn't always put where it's supposed to be. Guys weren't where they're supposed to. And I think another analyst said it very well. I know it wasn't an analyst; it was Fikatoa, the former All Black. There said it. He said, look out. This is the first time out of the box, but look out! This team, yeah. Basically, I'm paraphrasing what he said. This Springbok team is, it's coming. The good news, I think, is that we can see that the Springboks are spoiled for talent. Rossi Erasmus's most difficult job will be to pick the right players at the right time and keep everybody happy and still win, because ultimately the job is to win. But again, we expected this win. Wales wasn't supposed to be in this game. The scoreboard make it look like it was a thumping, but it wasn't a thumping for big parts of the game. Wales stayed in the game and they were valiant. I got to give them a lot of credit. Dewey Lake had an incredible game for Wales. He's got to be kind of bummed out because, I mean, you know, his team didn't win. But no, I mean, I left with a feeling like, okay, this was supposed to happen. We were supposed to win, but kind of I thought it could have been 72 to 10. You know, that's what I thought it could have been. So that's kind of the feeling I had. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. The one thing I noticed about Edwill van der Merwe, he scored it right down the middle. He's a wing. That means he was looking for work, something to do. He scored it from the middle. That's the first thing. And that double tackle that he made, that saved that certain try that Wales was going to score there. A double tackle in record time. How many tackles? 2 tackles in what, 2 seconds? Something ridiculous. I mean, and I heard before that he's actually quite strong physically. He does the same kind of bench press apparently that some props do. It tells you a lot. And I think you mentioned earlier, Russ is spoiled for choice. It's not so much spoiled for choice as to who he's going to choose. It's more to who he's going to not choose. Like Edwill van der Merwe has now put up his hand big time, but who do you leave out if you want to play him? Sacha or Sacha Colby or Kirtley or even a Moody. I mean, that's a lot of healthy competition. I like that position that the Boks are in. I wanted to ask you about the attack of the Boks, the Tony Brown influence. Any signs of that? Did you discern anything there?
You know, like you said, we couldn't watch the game as well as we wanted to. A lot of disruptions in the screening room, the press center. So there were periods when I drifted off, and so I don't think I could make a fair assessment of that. I didn't. Did you pick up something from it?
What I did pick up, not from watching but from reading, is some of Jordan Hendricks' rushed passes and stuff were sort of attributed to Tony Brown's style, and combined with the fact that he was making his debut at Twickenham for the Springboks and not even playing fly off for the Lions, that might have had an effect. But like you said, the general impression that I got from what people were saying is that the attack seems to be quite potent already, even though they were still a bit rusty, like you mentioned, especially in that first half. The thing that we have to take into consideration, this is a team that plays, that has players in it that play all over the world. Players from Japan, players from South Africa, players from Europe, not so much this weekend, but in terms of the different clubs. I think somewhere there's 25 different clubs across the world that these players play in when they get to the Springbok camp. And to pull that all together into an aligned team that plays together and plays a particular brand of rugby, which the Springboks do quite well, that should be a bit of a pat on the shoulder for old Rassie there, don't you think?
I agree 100%. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, these are players playing in like 12, 14 different time zones, coming together on short notice. And then that's why, I mean, I'm not beating the Springboks up. It's a result we expected, but there is work to be done. And Ireland's just around the corner. We got the Irish test coming up. And I don't know why it's just 2 tests. That's kind of lame. I mean, you want to win all 3, really make the Irish look bad. But and now you got to win both of them. Otherwise, it's a split. No, but I think that's absolutely correct. You got, I think Peter Steff is still playing Japan. And of course, Fop is still playing Japan. And then you got guys playing in France, you guys playing in URC, and and guys in South Africa. It's just, it really is. I think it's a nice accomplishment, and it really this was a good test to schedule. I'm not sure how Gatlin feels about it, but I suspect that Warren Gatlin probably feels this is good too. Look, I mean, he wanted bloody all these new players. They wanted bloody. They wanted to see what it's like to stand up against the world champs. And I think that Wales walks out of this. I know we're talking about spring, so I think Wales walks out of this game going, you know what? We put a good effort forward. These guys didn't buckle. I mean, they were beaten, but they didn't collapse. And I think that's kind of a win for Wales. I mean, it's a tiny country with only a few million inhabitants. Getting a professional level national rugby squad together is a challenge, because people look at Wales, but you forget, from that little island, you've got England, Scotland, Wales, and then right next door, you got Ireland. So you got to draw from that population for all those teams. No, I think Wales did pretty well, but the Springboks, their attack this is scary. I mean, if you're the opposition, I think Fikatoa was right. He's basically like, watch out, here they come. Listen, we have a chance here, and I don't want to be premature. And if I am, I'm premature by 10 years, because what I'm saying is that we have a chance here to replicate, or maybe, gosh forbid, even do something more than the All Blacks did in that 10-year run, that 10-year run when they were clearly the best team in the world. And kind of broke my heart to say that, admit that. That's why I don't like the All Blacks, because they were so good for so long. Everyone hates a champion, I guess. But this side has a chance to be that. I mean, they already have back-to-back World Cups under their belt. So, let's keep going. The attack is, oh man, I'm looking forward to some very exciting rugby in this season. Of course, I'm expecting 0 losses, but
No.
I'm a little greedy when it comes to the Springboks. We'll see how it goes.
Well, that's just on your point of the 2 tests. I think the third test was given to Portugal, remember? I think it was supposed to be 3 tests, but all the upcoming teams are now giving a chance to play against the proper team. And by that, I mean a level 1 team, a tier 1 team. So that Portugal test basically took the place of the 3rd Irish test, which I also think is a bit of a shame. But I see the point of giving these developing nations a bit of a run. Portugal did very well at the World Cup. It's not the same team anymore. It's not the same coach anymore. I expect a big hiding there. Yeah, but the principle, the idea behind it is noble. Maybe not such a good idea in practice, but let's leave that there. I wanted to talk to you about the Ireland game specifically. Rassie hasn't been able to put Ireland away yet. I mean, the Springboks lost 1 against Ireland in 2016. We lost against them in the World Cup. So I think there's a couple of scores to settle. This seems to be the new rivalry between South African rugby and the Irish. That seems to be developing quite a bit faster than what the All Blacks used to be for us.
Now, it is ironic. There really, in just short order, has developed this intense rivalry between Ireland. We even see smack being talked now. I think it was, I don't know who was it Etzebeth or Dan Linde? A couple people talking smack, and the Irish are like, oh, we're not paying attention to that. But of course they're paying attention to that. This has become quite a fierce rivalry, and I think it's great for world rugby. The Springboks All Blacks rivalry will always be there, but it's diminished in significance at the moment because the Irish one has really come to the front. And it's interesting because South Africa has a number of people of Irish descent, and so they root for them. which is interesting. And it just brings a new element to the game. So, and there's a fair number of South Africans living in Ireland working there right now. So it really mixes things up a bit. And I think that's fantastic. Yeah, no, back to the other point, just real quick. Yeah, you want to wrap it up? I did want to talk about this. Look, I've been a critic about the fact that one of the reasons why rugby isn't beating football is a challenge, but globally, but isn't a much bigger sport globally than it is because, nations that are, and I know people hate this term minnows, but tier 2 nations, I think that's even more condescending than minnows, but let's go with tier 2 nations and tier 3 nations in rugby, like the Eagles, the USA Eagles, Romania, Georgia, teams like that, Chile, Portugal do not get a chance to play top flight teams. The Velvetjes, the only time they play a team other than Zimbabwe or Uganda or something like that is in a World Cup, and no wonder the score is 87-0. I mean, you're never going to improve that level of quality for those countries if they never get test matches. So while I bemoan the fact that there aren't 3 games against Ireland because I want to beat them 3 times, I'm fine with the game against Portugal, and I think that's in Bloemfontein. That's where it's going to be at.
Yes.
I'm fine with that because Portugal is an up and coming nation. They earned their place. They won on a tiebreaker by scoring more aggregate points to get that Repas spot over the Eagles. And while I wanted to see the Eagles there, I was pretty excited to see Portugal in the World Cup, and they performed very well. My disappointment was I couldn't get a ticket to any of their games because the locations were in the opposite direction where I was going. But I did get a Portugal jersey, a World Cup jersey. It's pretty nice.
Nice.
But yeah, it is. It's lovely. But anyway, so I think it's a good decision. And the Ireland and South Africa thing, yeah, this is a rivalry that could have legs. I mean, you know what? And I think it's great if we have this intense rivalry with the All Blacks, which isn't going to go away, and we have an intense rivalry with Ireland, that's great. And then anytime England comes to town, we just hate on England. I think it's perfect.
Oh, especially the Australians when they come to town.
Or them as well.
Well, they're not much of a competition anymore, let's be honest. But I mean, we still don't like them. We never forget that '99 World Cup where they Larkham drop goal, dumped us out of the competition. We would have been back-to-back champions there as well. But that's a discussion for another day. One last thing I wanted to talk to you about before we go on to the squad announcement, which we'll talk about a bit later. One guy that really burst onto the scene, and I think that's quite an apt expression, is Sacha Feinberg Mngomezulu. What a debut as a Springbok. I mean, that guy just has ice in his veins. Yeah,
he does. And we talked before this, and I said the one thing I'm not that I don't think it's there, or I just said I wasn't sold on it because with the Stormers, I haven't seen him kick much. So I need to see him kick more. But he stepped up, slotted that thing through, and his game was brilliant. I mean, what a nice debut. Again, as a Stormers fan, I mean, I saw this coming. I knew it was time. I've been screaming for a call up for him, but not just him. I wasn't screaming for a call up for Edwin Feinberg, but I did think it was time for him to come up as well, and that was great to see. But I've also been screaming, of course, because I see these guys all the time. Jason Dixon, and hopefully get some more time on the pitch, and because that guy is really good. He is a demon out there. He's a whirling dervish. I call him the Tasmanian devil. It's fantastic. He gets where he plugs the gaps. He gets to where he's supposed to be. He doesn't let guys get by him by and large. And he actually handles the ball pretty well too, I think. So yeah, no, Sacha Feinberg Mngomezulu, this guy, you and I talked about it. I don't know if you said it or if it was, I think we talked about a once in a generation kind of guy. He can be that guy. And you're asking me what's his natural position? I don't know. It's like Damian Willemsek. What's his natural position? I think that Sacha at fullback is fantastic. I think if fly half, he can do that. So again, spoiled for choice. And some people don't like guys that are, multi-role. They play lots of positions, but we've seen that with other players in the past who've been incredible players and have shifted from place to place. So no, I'm really excited about Sacha Feinberg wearing the green and gold, and I think that Springbok fans are going to be thrilled with what he does on the pitch going forward over hopefully the next many years.
His best position, I would think, just to close that one off, is on the rugby field. He needs to be on the rugby field. Any position he's good at. He could probably go play prop as well, and he's talented enough. But I think the best position for him will be fly off in a Blue Bulls jersey. But that's
okay. Look, right. I know where you live. I know where you live.
I'll hide him in the cupboard or something. I'm telling you now. Nice, I can just imagine. So I'm going to ask you one last question about Jason Dixon compared to Elrigh Louw as a potential number 7/lock on the bench for the Springboks.
Tough call. I'm going to say something that's going to be very controversial, and people should not infer incorrectly or take it the wrong way, because I love Elrigh Louw as a player. But Elrigh Louw sometimes seems to get lost in the moment, like a bull in a china shop, and doesn't want to offload, like, oh, I'm going through. And sometimes I've noticed that slows down the attack and the momentum. And that's not a criticism. I mean, maybe he sees something on the pitch. I'm not down there, but I see that. Whereas Ben Jason Dixon, in my view, seems to be a more considered, thoughtful, and not like he's a nice guy, but he's calculating the game as it unfolds, I think, better than Elrigh Louw. That may be a very controversial statement. Both of them are fantastic players. I would start either one of them. You know, if I have a choice, if one's injured, that make it easier, I could put the other guy. But I think that, to me, what I've seen the past couple of seasons, I think that's the difference. But when Elrigh Louw, his head is in the game and he's on, oh man, he's unbelievable. He's just unbelievable. But I mean, we saw him in, I don't know if it was this game or a recent game, where he broke up the middle and he didn't even look to offload the ball. He had a couple guys chasing him and he tried to drag him and he got taken down. We never got any points out of it, just in front of the try line. And that's an example of what I'm talking about. But I mean, again, that's getting caught up in the moment. And it's not a criticism, because I'm probably going to get flamed for this, but because I think Elrigh Louw is just absolutely amazing. I mean, Elrigh Louw and Panicum on the same pitch for the Bulls, I mean, that was fantastic. But Ben Jason Dixon, to me, I think his head stays in the game more.
Chris, we had this discussion while he was still in South Africa. Are we going to continue this discussion once you're back in America and the Springboks squad has been announced?
Yep, absolutely. It's a fantastic chat with you. Let me get the rest of my bags together. I managed to keep my bags under 23 kgs, which means I won't be charged a fortune at the airport. That was a bit of a challenge, because I typically come here and buy lots of rugby jerseys, clothing, and books, and the books weigh a ton. But they sure do. Anyway, so I've still got the rest of the day. I've got some things to do, but thanks a lot. And I'm looking forward to a conversation about the BULLS selection and what happens against Ireland.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Speak to you soon, man.
This is the Rugby Ascendant podcast with Welman and Chris Wyatt.